On a recent trip up to the California desert to do some tests for the company that I work for, I stumbled into the depths of kitty litter hell. Bear with me a few minutes and I'll tell you about some of the things that are hidden in the California desert that you've never dreamed of. Now anybody can be caught short for a bathroom break, and after a dinner the night before the trip, being greasy, spicy Thai food, the 2-hour drive up to the desert promised to put a strain on my control systems. Just to add insult to injury, we had to leave the company front door at 6 a.m. to meet another group in the middle of nowhere at 8 a.m. So I never got a chance to rest before getting into the car. On the way to the test site, we stopped at the most awful McDonald's I've ever been to. The pancakes were actually hard from being on the shelf for a few hours before I got them. I had a little coffee with breakfast and we got back in the car and continued to head into the unknown. I noted that a little pressure was building. We drove down smaller and smaller roads until we reached the work area turnoff. Not a car was in sight, and there was nothing but flat, hard, sandy clay all the way to the horizon in all directions. As we bounced and bumped over the desert floor, I could tell that things might not go well for me in the near future. As we drove up to the work area, I saw a few buildings about a half-mile distance, and my hope of a comfortable day started to return. Here's what the area and the buildings looked like when we arrived. I asked the guy I was with what those buildings are, and he said they made cat litter there by just scooping up the floor of the desert and putting it in bags. The buildings appeared to be about a half-mile away. While the other guys I was with were setting up the equipment, I announced that I'd be heading off to see if they had a restroom over there, and I started walking. I judged the distance about right, except as I got closer, the place started to look more and more like a fortress. I came up to a sheer drop of about 40 feet and started to get worried, so I started looking around for a way in. After a few minutes, I found some hope. Whether intentional or not, the place seemed to be surrounded by a moat, disguised as huge cracks in the desert floor up to 6 feet deep, with sheer walls. I found a narrow spot and jumped over. Then I found I had to climb a steep hill that surrounded the place. I got to the top of the hill and finally saw my way to the parking lot, which was empty, but I did see a single door ajar at the side of the nearest building, which was still some 100 yards away. I decided that I'd just walk in like I owned the place and ask where the men's room is, and that's just what I did. There was a woman partially hidden behind some machinery who gave me directions, and I promptly and accurately followed them to the door she described. Just as I got to the door, I noticed that it said Tom's instead of men's, and I figured that someone was being cute because this is a cat litter place, and by this time there was about 10 seconds between me and a mess. I opened the door and I thought that I must have misunderstood the directions. I found a dimly lit room filled with cat litter leveled off pretty neatly at what should be floor level. I saw some clumps in the litter and decided that no matter what, the enemy was at the gates and come what may, I was going to add my own clumps to that litter box. Nature prevailed and I was much relieved, although I had, shall we say, cat litter behind the curtains in the library. Well, now that I was feeling more comfortable, I left the Tom's room and found that in my haste to arrive, I had forgotten how to get to the Tom's room. So I started wandering around the place, looking for a way out. What I stumbled on next boggled my mind. I saw at least 100-foot square of 6-inch deep cat litter. I guess it must have been a test area because there were dozens and dozens of cats, and they all seemed to be relieving themselves almost continually. This place must have been doing some genetic research too, because many of the cats seemed to have been spliced middle to middle with the head at the junction of the two ends. I guess that's so they could perform double duty, you might say. I saw this and got really worried, so I found the nearest door and walked and stumbled back to the hill, over the dry wash moat and through what little brush existed until I got back to the guys I was working with. I tried to explain what I had seen and they laughed and thought I was joking. So I didn't mention it again until now. So if you see a building in the middle of an empty desert and it doesn't seem quite right to you, go ahead, take a look, and ask for the Tom's Room. I dare you.